Okay, good afternoon, guys. Today I'm going to do a little presentation on the cloud. We'll get the presentation out of the way and then we'll do a little lab. The lab's going to consist of deploying something from Visual Studio onto Azure. So the presentation I'm rocking today is going to be it comes straight from Microsoft, so it's going to be heavily Azure influenced, but a lot of this sort of cloud stuff, which many of us have taken sort of classes before, sort of know some of the basics about it, and it's going to be, there's a lot of concepts that are applied to sort of to general cloud platforms. So it's not just for Azure. You could use OpenShift or whatever. And there's a little bit of Microsoft propaganda in here, so take that with a grain of salt too. Okay, so what can the cloud do for me? And you're gonna have to excuse, I gotta do it in this presentation mode so I can actually see my notes and record at the same time. So companies of all sizes are placing big bets on the cloud. So what does that mean? Well, obviously, somebody like Facebook or, Google, they need tremendous amounts of computing power. But what they're saying here is not just the big companies are benefiting from the cloud. Medium and small sized businesses are also utilizing it to its potential. The thing is, you can scale up, dynamically or manually if you need to face big peaks in your usage and stuff like any server side stuff that needs to happen. But you can also scale down, and there's efficiencies that are realized with the cloud performance, with cloud computing as well. So when you graduate, your job will probably use the cloud. I think it goes without saying, and I don't need to tell you guys that there's not really much programming today that doesn't touch some sort of aspect of the web. Even if you're working on embedded systems, there's often times where you need to interface with the web, you need to hit some sort of API or something like that. You need to, even for mobile apps, there needs to be a lot of server-side stuff going on, or even just sort of basic websites. There's so many facets of programming that are going to touch cloud computing and data storage, stuff like that too. So if this is something we all get good at, there's going to be lots of jobs out there for us. I don't think all of us do want to work at the bank of COBOL. I know deep down in your heart, Mike, I know you don't want to be doing that. Maybe it's a good paycheck, but
maybe he does.
We want to build cutting edge stuff. Why did we get into programming? Not to be boring. I didn't, anyways. So if you want your choice of jobs, shouldn't you be prepared? I didn't choose these clip arts, just so don't judge me too harshly. So you can start using the cloud today. Again, this comes from Microsoft, so they want you to start using Azure. Let's dig in and see how it works. We got a guy with a shovel. Let's get going. Okay, so what is the cloud? I don't think I need to tell you guys what the cloud is, but the advantages are, speed, scale, and economics. Sort of the old setup, hosting servers inside your business or paying some rinky-dink company down the road that hosts sort of all the small business websites to do stuff like that doesn't make sense anymore. There's, both in terms of money and the economics, there's sort of efficiencies that can be realized that way, especially if you're running sort of multiple applications at once that need to scale up and down. Like I said, you can scale up and down dynamically. We'll sort of get into the fine-grained details of some of that stuff in a minute, but you can harness that however you need. So, if you buy a bunch of hardware to sort of manage your peak usage, a lot of that hardware is going to be unused most of the time, and you're still paying for, certainly the upfront costs in hardware. You're going to be paying for different bandwidth things, a lot of power usage, stuff like that. You let some of these big companies handle the infrastructure and some of the platform stuff like that. You can there's a lot of efficiencies in speed, scale, and economics that can be realized. So the example they give in the slides here is how many servers would you need to host websites for the Olympics? So think about some sort of global event like the Olympics where you've got traffic coming in from around the world, literally every corner of the world, and as the Olympics approach, there's obviously going to be a crazy strain on hardware. How would you manage that? Say we're 2 years out from the Olympics. Obviously you're going to need a presence. A large sort of international organization like the Olympic Committee, they would still sort of need a presence, but they would need to be able to scale up dynamically when they need to, and they would want to do it at sort of the best cost possible. So they say, how do we manage applications that have spikes in demands? They say you could buy enough servers to handle the peaks, but again, that gets back to what I was saying earlier. If you buy all those servers, you have to manage them in-house, which is a pain in the ass. And B, there's a lot of sort of wasted efficiency there. Or you could run it in the cloud. When you hit a spike, you spin up extra resources, and when the spike ends, you shut down those extra resources. You're expanding and shrinking to meet your needs. So they've got an example here that's sort of quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And quarter 2, they had a crazy spike. Now, it doesn't need to be necessarily in a quarter. It could be, depending on your business, every Tuesday maybe you get a crazy spike. Or every day at 2 o'clock you get a crazy spike. You can sort of manage it that way to spin up and scale your resources as necessary. So this is a good slide here. This sort of goes through the differences between infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and it contrasts that with sort of the traditional setup, on-premises, private cloud. I don't think anybody was calling it a private cloud before the actual cloud came out. So traditionally, you would need to manage your data access, your applications, your runtime, your operating system, your virtual machines, compute, I don't even know what that means, networking, and storage. Infrastructure as a service, say you want to use, Amazon Web Services or something like that, where you're basically just sort of renting hardware almost. You still manage the data access, the applications, the runtime, stuff like that, but the infrastructure that underlies it, sort of the networking, the storage, and the computing, that's sort of managed by that service. Then when you move on to the platform as a service, so this would be like Azure, you manage your data and your access and your applications, but everything else is taken care of for you. Now, there's certainly settings in the platforms that you can manage as well, like how it's going to respond dynamically to scaling and whatnot. But that's sort of a set it and forget it. And then when you get into something like software as a service, you don't need to deal with any of that stuff like that at all. All you're dealing with is essentially an application. You're the end user of that. There's a lot of overlap between all three of these. So don't get too bogged down, and there's a lot, all of these platforms are extremely flexible. That's sort of the one of the big things, one of the big advantages going forward. We can run whatever we want on Azure. We can run whatever we want on any sort of platform. If you guys have any questions or inputs, please jump right in. Go.
Just to add to that, one of the things they talk about. Can you make that slide bigger for a second?
Sure.
One of the things they talk about with these models. So again, private cloud, right? Everything here is what we do today. So let's say John and I, we open up a business, right? Because John is a networking guy, and I know a little bit about software, right? We have to manage everything. We have to buy servers. John's going to spend $50,000 on his server for the business, right? A blade, right? Some kind of networking devices, right? Because that's the way he is. Because he's my man, right? He's going to buy all that stuff for the business, right? Mm-hmm. What's that? That's a lot of cash. I'm just saying, we're gonna put a rack together, right? Some kind of fiber optics inside the thing. That's all us, right? That's private cloud, right? So we want to make sure that our entire company is being served. It's all this, and it's capital expenditure. So this is the two models we're talking about, where Aaron talked about, the different economies. Go back a couple slides to the one that you talked about, where it was the 3 reasons for doing cloud. There's one slide. That's that one. Right?
Oh, I'm not using the animations here. Oh, there's some marks deducted.
So it'll speed because let's face it, right? On the cloud, we're going to get an increase of performance compared to if we host it ourselves. Even the smaller providers, like they don't have the same kind of speed that the big ones have. Like for example, Amazon, because they can ramp up with the demand, right? Or Google. Scale, of course, we can scale, like you said, like Aaron was saying, but this is the key point here for most businesses, right? They want to move away from a capital expenditure model, CapEx, right? They want to move into OpEx. That's what they call it from a corporate perspective. We're talking about CapEx, it's capital expenditure. We're spending money on stuff inside the business, servers, software, whatever, that kind of stuff.
People.
Right. If we move away from that, because you need people to service your software and your hardware, right? But with the cloud, move away from that CapEx model into the OpEx model, operating expenses. So where we pay monthly for someone else to monitor and do everything for us. Why? You might say, yeah, but it's more expensive. it is a little bit more expensive month to month if you, from a cost of ownership perspective, but you're not tied into it. Your money isn't tied into mortar and bricks. It's not tied into, you know, stuff that's gonna go bad in 3 years, right? I always look at hardware, computer hardware is like almost like a fruit that ripens in about 3 years, and it's gonna go bad and stink after a while, right? Well, you don't have to worry about that stinky hardware. It's gonna go away, and then you can use them. They'll upgrade their stuff on the back end. You don't have to worry about it. They take care of all that. They take care of the licensing. They take care of the hardware. They make sure that it runs properly, and you can ramp up as you need to. That's why this slide's important. Go back to the other slide, the one that with those 3 models. So here, we're managing everything here ourselves, right? And these 3 slides, which is really, really important. I want you to take, when we put this up on Blackboard, this is one of the ones I want you to understand, these terminologies, right? So private cloud, infrastructure as a service, big one, take away from this course, right? Where we do the infrastructure here, and then the other stuff we manage, right? So they take care of our servers and all that kind of stuff. Just like Aaron said, as we ramp up, more and more of our stuff we do in the private cloud is taken care of by the service provider. Until we're just using the application, just like Dropbox. I like to think about this one. The last one is Dropbox. We don't manage the application. It's their application. It's their service. It's their infrastructure. It's their everything. The only thing we manage is our data. We just pop our data into Dropbox or GitHub, right? And fully everything else is taken care of by them, right? And it's being more and more popular. This is more and more popular now, right? Because we don't have to worry about it. Before we have to worry about it. Some concerns, privacy. Some concerns, right? Security. Yeah.
What if the Microsoft Cloud Service Center went down?
Well, that's where they have. We're going to go over that. I think Aaron's
I
going to
would,
cover that.
well, I would add to the 3 points, you know, not just scale, economics and speed, but reliability too. I would say reliability is, you know, it's much more like. Was it this class? Were you talking about the one throat to choke, or was that Wayne?
That was
Wayne. So if you know, if you're on Azure, there's one guy you go to and you say, when we get into the calculations later, I'll show you what we can ramp up. Say we're starting a company, this whole classroom. We're throwing some serious money at it. We want some serious support to back that up. So we're going to take that slider up, and then I pay $1,500 a month. So when I call it up, you know, Frank on the other line better damn well have an answer, or we got a problem. That's the one throat to choke sort of mentality too, right?
The other thing to think about is this. Companies are going with a hybrid model. This is the biggest one now, right? Where they do, so John and I, we're building our company. I'm saying John, I like John. Right? And then, I'm just saying, I love you too, man. I love you, right? But John and I, okay, I'll say Mike. Mike and I, right? Mike kicks my ass all the time, right? And Mike and I build a company, and then we do some of this because, you know, he's not comfortable doing all of this. He wants some privacy, some security here. And then, for us to ramp up, we do a hybrid cloud. We do some of that and some of this. That is the most popular option right now. We do a little bit of both for companies. Take it away. Sorry, I just wanted to mention that.
It also goes back to, like, you know, what if Azure goes down? It's sort of like the same question. What if Google goes down? If Google and Azure go down, the internet's got bigger problems than
us.
Yes. You know, we can't manage all that stuff. You know what I mean? So, you know, we're going to pay for that reliability. We better get it, right? Okay. I don't know how it's actually recording here. Okay, so obviously Azure wants you to use their services, but the beauty of a cloud platform is we can use whatever we want. So if we want to build a Node application, we want to use a Redis database, we want to build a VM like we have, you know, with Visual Studio for a development environment. We want to run any number of Linux. We don't need to run a Windows server, despite this being Microsoft. You know, 10 years ago, maybe I would be a little more apprehensive about getting into a Microsoft product like this. But I think Microsoft's seen the light and said, you know, we can't build these sort of closed systems anymore because that's not the way the industry is going. We need to build in sort of that flexibility and sort of, unchain the hands of the developers, you know what I mean? Oftentimes you're going to want a Linux server. That's just the way it is. And we'll get into some other sort of tools that are associated with that. This is a slide that they deleted out of their presentation, but I'll quickly touch on it. You know, obviously VMs. We've set up a VM. If you haven't got your VM spun up, get it going right now because we're going to get into the lab at the end here. Virtual machines. So yeah, like I said earlier, we can do a Windows server, no problem, but Linux machines, absolutely too. We can scale for 1 to thousands of VM instances, no problem. That can be manually dealt with, or we can set up a plan to deal with that dynamically, and we'll look at that in a little bit. And we say, it's a pay-as-you-go sort of thing. You save money with per minute billing. You pay what you use, which is a large difference between, again, when we go back to the slide with when we manage everything, that's a flat fee. And we're constantly, maybe things like bandwidth and stuff like that are going to vary, fluctuate over a period of time. But it's largely a flat sort of a trajectory. With this, we can put our resources or allocate our resources as we need them, and open and extensible. That's a huge part for me. Again, if I was going to get into a cloud platform and I had to use Azure's Microsoft everything, that would be a non-starter for me. And then it talks about, you can do enterprise level stuff too. So there's Puppet and Chef. These are sort of management tools. I'm not too familiar with them. And they're not, not focusing or forcing you to lock onto Microsoft technologies. It's more open than ever. Again, this is a bit of a Azure propaganda here, but I believe them. Maybe I'm naive. Okay, so provisioning the VM. This is what we did the other day. So you can provision the VM a few different ways. So what we did is we went into the management portal. We said, I want this VM. I want these specs on it. Let's spin it up. Let's go. You can do that. You can script it through Windows, Linux, and Mac. No problem. Interestingly, though, you could tap into the REST API and say, oh, I want to build a front end, or I'm building an application that needs to manage a bunch of VM instances. I don't want to do it through their portal. So I could build something, in Angular or whatever, and then I would tap into API calls. Now I know many guys in this room are, we're working on projects that deal with different REST APIs. But I could build a REST API, or hit that API with a request and say, okay, let's spin up this VM, or let's spin up this VM. You can do it programmatically, so that's different too. VMs, image, and size. Windows Server, any sort of Linux distro you need to suit your needs too, right? And then new disk is persistent in storage, so you're storing it on the cloud as well. So this just goes through some of the different VMs you can use. Like I said, so yeah, you're going to start with a Windows Server, but then we go through all these Linux distros: Ubuntu, CentOS, SUSE, Oracle Linux, and then we get into database stuff where we, again, we're using the Windows SQL Server, or we can use Oracle, or we can use BizTalk. I don't know about BizTalk, SharePoint, anything you need. This is a beauty. Again, we're dealing with Microsoft. This is enterprise level stuff that even the small guys can harness, and it's it's built-in functionality, sort of a interoperability between many different technologies. Go.
So just to add to that, so again, think about this gallery as a gallery of appliances, right? So again, in the same model we're talking about, me and John, we're opening up a business, right? And then so it's not Mike, it's John, right? And then what we do is, we don't need just a Microsoft server. We also in our company, for whatever reason, we're going to need a CentOS server, right? So we spin up a CentOS VM, right? For whatever reason, why we're spinning it. But again, you can use these servers, for development. You can also use these servers to serve, like actually to be a server for whatever is a file server or whatever in your company, right? So instead of making your own server farm or whatever, in a mixed networking environment, you can create everything through your gallery, and they all connect nicely. You don't have to worry about it, right? This is the beautiful thing, right? If you're going to think about making websites, and on the back end, you can have, we're going to talk about later on, they use the same kind of concept for this gallery where you can create a website with a different stack. So it's going to be an ASP.NET website, it's going to be a website with PHP, Node, whatever. And it comes from this idea here, this idea of some kind of gallery of these virtual machines that spin up for us. Cool.
And it's extremely flexible. You're not just picking one and you stick with it. It's a stack too, right? And there's layers of functionality you can build into it. Like SAP, I'm not sure what HANA exactly is, but SAP is like a big sort of German management company that they're monolithic, but they obviously have some sort of extension in this too. Accounting, payroll, sort of, yeah, they handle absolutely everything, right? again, back to the flexibility, I'm thinking, a couple semesters ago when we were doing advanced web programming and we got our Azure passes, certain individuals, I don't want to name their names on the recording here, started up Bitcoin mining operations, which is amazing. And the light bulb went off in my head. Like, this really isn't just, this isn't a web server. No, it wasn't Mike. It wasn't Mike. But this isn't just a web server. This is a platform. We can do whatever we want on it. So again, redundant slides. They want us to do a little demo, create a virtual machine on Azure. Hopefully everybody's done that. Next. VM extensions. Here we go against sort of, there's a difference between development and DevOps too, right? There's entire guys, maybe you guys will go out in the industry and you won't exactly be writing the code, but there's a lot of orchestration involved with sort of actually deploying things and sort of the development operations, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of tools now that are coming out that are really helping you to management. Who here knows about Docker? Learn Docker, I'm telling you. These guys, Neil's laughing because he's heard me go on about it.
I just went for a beer and then I heard about that.
Yeah, that's all it usually takes is a few beers into me and I get yapping about stuff. But okay, so Docker is it's a Linux-based sort of a you containerize services, right? So if you need to keep a VM or not, you could use a VM. This is sort of different than the VM. You have a base image and then you're building different things on top of it. So you want to keep your database in one little container. It's completely closed off. You manage all its dependencies inside that container. You open up ports between the different pieces. So you could have, it's all based on Linux. So you're gonna have a Linux image. Then you're gonna have, some sort of server perhaps. Then you're gonna have a database. You can build the little pieces. You know the little pieces work. They're contained. They're testable. And then when you deploy it, there's absolutely no dependencies, issues that you need to worry about. Shoot.
I'm assuming you know a hell of a lot more than I do about it. From what I gathered, it's like, is it one application in one box per se, or is it multiple ones for each segment?
Well, there's a few different sort of design patterns you can tackle. The one container, the one sort of box, that's more of a VM, right, where you would sort of have everything in one. That's what we're trying to get away from. When you do it like that, you need to keep the entire VM in the image. What we want to be able to say is, we have a CentOS sort of Linux server running. We don't need to worry about that. That's the image. We'll let the Docker sort of manages like GitHub, where you can pull all the pieces down. So basically, my Docker image is sort of a set of instructions that will build that image, right? So my Docker image could be a matter of megabytes, but it's going to build the VM on top of it. So the real modern design practice is you're going to build it, in pieces. That's really the best way to do it.
Cool.
And there's oftentimes when you're moving from a development environment to a production environment, how many times have we heard, well, it worked on my machine, right? This is where we cut that problem right out. Anyways, I could do a whole presentation on Docker, and this is just, but it's the hot thing. I'm telling you, in the last year, it's exploded. Learn this, you'll be holding golden. Tips to save money. Again, stuff we've covered already. It's per minute. Stop the VM. Nick, you're killing your. Nick's already blowing half his budget. He learned the lesson the hard way. He's going to run out of money. He's not going to be able to hand in assignments. Don't be Nick. Then we get into a bunch of stuff, search. We're going to skip all over this stuff. Mobile apps. Mobile apps aren't just a mobile app. You need to build a backend for your mobile app. You need to build in server-side functionality to serve that stuff up. You want to sort of build in pieces. So say we need to sign in with Microsoft, Facebook. Let's throw those pieces in there. Let's not reinvent the wheel. They're already out there. Let's utilize them. Cross-platform stuff. I don't know who in the right mind is going to be developing Windows Phones apps, but the possibility's there. Or Android or iOS, and a lot of the HTML technology drives the bus in that situation. So it talks a bit about the mobile services. Let users sign into your app using their Facebook, Twitter, Active Directory, Google accounts, all sorts of stuff like that. There's a few different ways to handle this. Azure's got one solution to deal with that. We're going to skip over all this sort of stuff, but let's quickly it talks about you want an SQL database, use Azure SQL database, or if you don't want Azure SQL database, use MySQL or use Microsoft SQL. Shoot.
Can't really custom on your price then.
right?
In what
Because
sense?
Isn't a SQL server and all that, like, isn't that a separate form of licensing? And then you can just pay for the VM and use it versus buying an SQL license, a Visual Studio license.
I would assume so, and it's sort of pay what you use too, right? I think Microsoft really is moving towards the model of let's not make it hard for guys to get up and started. We'll make money off us later, right? Let's give everybody in this room Visual Studio. They're all going to be, you know, your first hit's free, right? It's like the drug dealer. I know I use that analogy a million times, but let's get you hooked and then keep coming back for more. No, not at all. So they tell me. But having said that, there's, especially if you're using sort of like those containerized solutions like Docker and stuff like that, if all of a sudden Azure changes their terms of service and you don't like it and like, screw Azure, I'm going somewhere else, we can pull it all out and we know that it's going to run on any sort of cloud platform. There are sort of initiatives, sort of like the OpenStack initiatives too, where they're sort of standardizing practices across cloud platforms too. So it's almost getting to the point where the cloud you choose doesn't matter. You can manage it a number of ways. You don't even need to use the management portal if you've got sort of, if you're doing an enterprise level sort of thing, maybe your company's got their own management portal and you're just tapping into sort of the functionality. But anyways, yeah, so you can, like Neil's saying, you instead of getting a Microsoft SQL server, you know, spin up a service. Let's say you don't want to use SQL, you can use sort of like a simple key value pair Redis cache system. Say you don't want to use, say you want to use NoSQL. Azure's got its own solution, but again, you want to use Mongo, you want to use whatever, throw it into a service. The world is your oyster. We don't need to worry about this. Okay, hosting websites. It seems simple. And oftentimes, websites nowadays aren't just websites. If we're building .NET applications, we're building the next Facebook, we're building whatever, it's going to be a web application, not just a website. So it's not, we're not just serving static content. If you want to serve static content, this is fine. You know, if you were a web company and you just served a lot of small businesses and you just served up a lot of static content and stuff like that, you could manage all from one sort of portal in Azure, and it's great. Sort of consolidating your management practices and sort of one place to manage everything is there's efficiencies to be had in that sort of sense, in that approach. If it's not on your own server, it is in the cloud. No, I don't know if they really mean that, but if it's not on your own server, you know, obviously with the cloud there is sort of a loss of control to some degree, but I think we're moving in the direction where if I need to yank my data off the cloud and stuff like that, I can. There's also a lot of, you know, shady sites. Say like you're the Pirate Bay. All that stuff is hosted on a cloud somewhere, and the cloud providers have no idea because it's all encrypted and stuff like that. So it's not like Microsoft is going into your website and auditing, you know, what you're using it for. Now, maybe if there's crazy, if they see some sort of pattern of behavior, that they'll shut it down. But, you know, there is still, you know, the concern is you're losing control, but there are ways to remedy that. So this is a nice little graphic here. We're talking about, one side we've got all our developers. So we got, you know, me here with the Mac. We got Mike over there with his Windows machine. We got Stevens over here with Linux not depicted. And then in between that, we've got sort of our source control systems. We've got GitHub, we've got Visual Studio Online, or Bitbucket, whatever you want. It doesn't need to be GitHub either. Say I want to host a Git repository right on Azure, I can do that. I don't need to use GitHub. It serves up sort of the website. Now, it doesn't need to be a website, it could be anything, but for, you know, this example it is. And we can use .NET, we can use Python, we can use Node.js, Java, PHP, you name it. It doesn't matter. The end users all sort of get the same thing. It shoots through like that. So deployment, we're going to get into the lab later, or the little exercise. It's going to be centered around deployment. But you know, you can pick your poison here. You want to use Visual Studio Online, go nuts. Codeplex, no idea what that is, but I'm assuming it's does anybody know what Codeplex is?
Isn't that Google's? Google Code?
If it's Google Code, they just shut that down, which was like their version of GitHub, but I'm not sure. Yeah, go nuts.
Okay, Mike. You walked through the presentation, and I wasn't learning.
It's okay, we'll be flexible. So yeah, like I said, we don't need to use GitHub. GitHub's great, but say I just want to hold my own private Git repository. You know, a Git repository is just a folder essentially on your computer. It doesn't need to be hosted online, or you can host it wherever you want. we can set up a storage container on Azure, and that could be our GitHub repository. Or we could do a full-blown VM like we've done and have a Git repository on there shared across. Or we can use stuff like GitHub, Bitbucket, even Dropbox. If I have a folder and I just want to just throw a bunch of stuff up, Dropbox is sometimes a better solution. Or we can go like Stone Age technology and use FTP. Don't do that.
GoFlex is Microsoft's version of GitHub.
Thanks, Neil. Neil's got my back. Need more power. So here's one of sort of the big things that these cloud platforms, the big advantages that you can harness. So we've talked about scalability, but how do we manage that scalability? So manually, first of all, is the first solution. Say my servers are getting swamped, and I'm like, wow, this isn't going to work. I need to bump up instances on my my website. No problem. Let's slide her up. Now, obviously, when you do stuff like this, you need to keep in mind sort of different pricing concerns, but it's not that big of a deal. If you got all that stuff sort of worked out, just bump it up and worry about it later. You know what I mean? So the worst thing that happened, if you're in the web business and your website's down, you're failed. That's sort of like number one. Reliability is the biggest thing. So it talks about the basic. You need a basic plan. The free plan doesn't sort of deal with this stuff. But hopefully we're all going to be in jobs where we're not dealing with free garbage software all the time. At the end of the day, you're going to have to shell out some money. I think programmers sometimes get locked into, well, this is a nice free open source solution. Sometimes you need to jettison that idea and sort of go with a paid solution.
Down.
See how offended John Luke is?
How much did you pay for your keyboard?
Let's not discuss this. Your opinions are no longer valid.
They get the most money out of any department. IT in almost every business, we're spending so much. No one cares.
The challenge for guys like us and Natasha is we need to be able to articulate the value that this brings to an organization, to management. You can't just say, well, this is cutting edge, and that falls on deaf ears. You need to say, this is where we need to be. This is the value that there's a reliability, scalability. All the big boys are doing it. Do you want to be you want to be a big boy, or do you want to be MySpace or something? I don't know. I know. No, they're coming back. They're coming back. It's all that Timberlake money, right? Okay, so manually isn't always practical. We need to sort of have a dynamic response to some of the things that happen on the web. The web is an amazing opportunity to hit all sorts of people, but it's also scary at times. If you blow up on the internet, how many times does something get posted on Reddit and 1,000 nerds hit that site, or gazillions of nerds, and it takes it down, right? They call it the hug of death, right? It's done. We need to be able to scale up instantly. So we start out with our one website like we had before. We've got a steady stream of users. Well, we start to blow up. We've got a little more. Let's blow it up into 3 instances. No problem. That's handled automatically. And I'll show you sort of the management panel that deals with that in a second. Say we get a lot of traffic. Let's spin up a few thousand instances. It doesn't matter. You'll pay for it, but hopefully if you're getting this sort of traffic and this sort of traction, you're making money to begin with. You know what I mean? So here's where you would sort of manage your scheduling and stuff like that. Now every sort of cloud platform, they're going to have something similar like this. You know what I mean? Recurring schedules. So every Tuesday you get hit. Let's set up something for Tuesday. You can scale for different settings for day and night, weekdays and weekends, specific dates. You've got you're the Olympics. Maybe the Olympics is a bad example, but or some sort of big event that's happening. Obviously, that day is where you're going to get the most traffic. You can pre-plan accordingly, sort of the range of scaling up you can do. You do want to sort of manage, if money is an issue, you do need to manage sort of the maximums and minimums of where it's going to scale up and down to. So here's where we go with sort of like I was saying, the range. So you would say here, I don't want to go below 2 instances, or I don't want to go above 6 instances. Min and max CPU, Azure will spin up and shut down those as it needs to. and then you can sort of manage. I guess every 5 minutes it's going to reevaluate where it needs to scale to, and if it's too low, it'll scale down and save you money. Okay, how do I deploy to a new website safely? So this goes through sort of the staging process. So say you have a new website, we make a few changes, we we pull off sort of an instance, we set up a staging area, some fancy, so there's your production on your left, I guess your staging area would be on the right. You get everything working in your staging instance, you flip the switch, it becomes your production instance. The advantage of this is, again, we're staging in the same environment that we're going to deploy to production. That sort of reduces a lot of the pain points that are associated with sort of migrating to a production stage. So again, yeah, you can test your site. When you go live, the original production site is moved to the staging slot, no problem. Quickly switch. If something blows up, we'll move it right back. We should all be working with sort of source control. All that sort of stuff can be handled. Flip it, switch back. Your instances are warmed up into staging, so when you go to production, you don't have downtime. Traffic redirect is seamless. So here we talk about sort of the Azure, the regions of operation here. I was trying to figure out why Australia's got the 2 blue dots. I don't know why. Any
Australia's
ideas?
got some crazy internet regulations. Probably.
Was it a coming soon thing when they put that
Is
together?
that what it is?
Because
Okay.
I think Australia was fairly recent. Because it says in 2014, and I'm pretty sure Australia was like in the past few months.
Yeah,
they
because it
just
says
launched
14
Azure
regions
there.
worldwide. There's
Right.
14 green dots.
Okay, good. You guys figured it out.
And
I had no idea.
The other thing is that they don't have the blue dots in Canada but there's supposed to be a blue dot in Vancouver for 2015, right? So I know that that's the first data center in Canada.
Yeah, that is not a Canadian data.
No.
I'm sure that's...
It's all American dots. That's why we don't have that.
USC's number 2.
If you go to your VM, if you notice your VM doesn't show Canada, Eastern US, because we don't have a Canadian data center.
It'll happen, though. You got to realize this stuff is relatively new. And Microsoft is throwing serious resources behind this, and so are every other, even the open source community, you've got a lot of large corporations. I've used OpenShift, which is sort of Red Hat's version of the cloud environment. There's a lot of sort of big companies throwing, professional developers at the problem too to solve it, you know what I mean? And there's different sort of organizations too that are standardizing some of these practices as well. So this will grow. You will see Canadian dots shortly. So here's where it talks about intelligent routing of traffic. So say, we've got an app set up in Buffalo, we've got an app set up in England, we've got an app set up in Shanghai or something. Where do we send the traffic? Well, it's not necessarily going to be always the closest location. It's going to be the site with the lowest latency. So we'll ping the app, we'll say this guy is the lowest, and we'll shoot them over there. London, England goes down. We don't even need to worry about that. If you're in London, the closest app to use down, we'll just shoot you over to the United States. It's no problem at all. There's also a lot of stuff sort of like load balancing solutions too, right? Say if everybody in the United States is just hammering that app, and then there's another guy in the United States who hits it, well, it doesn't make the most sense to hit the United States sort of instance further. It'll automatically load balance it to the best solution, the quickest response. All right, so we're almost here where we're going to start deploying stuff. I'll finish up this presentation before we do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a basic website. We're going to do it in Visual Studio in the VM that we've spun up, and we're going to deploy it directly to Azure. We don't have to set up any sort of instance through the portal. We're going to do it all through Visual Studio. Do I have to pay for all this? Yes, is the solution. Who can get free Azure? Don't worry about it. What I would like to show you guys, though, is the pricing calculator. This is sort of a cool little thing. So say we want to, what do we want to start up? Let's start up just an app service. So we can start low, 0.00 a month, no problem. You're obviously not going to get a lot of bang for the buck there. Well, maybe it is good bang for your buck if it's free. But say we want to Let's go premium. Say we're just getting hammered and we want to just ramp up like you wouldn't believe. So this is where you just start clicking this stuff. I want 4 cores with 7 gigs of RAM on 20 VMs. There's $6,000 a month right there already. You know what I mean? Say we want.
Wait, go down to one VM, out of curiosity.
1 VM is 313, or 40 cents an hour. All this stuff is really billed on a per hour basis. But this is premium. Again, this is on the 4-core, 7 gigabytes of RAM, app service, 250 gigabytes of storage. But let's just ramp it up. Let's see how high we can get it here. Bandwidth?
We're not going to get any downloads or any data. It's 0.
That's a good question, isn't it?
Clearly, we're going to need a couple.
We're going to need some bandwidth.
We're going to need like a couple terabytes.
How about 2,000 gigabytes? Is that allowed to do you, John Lee?
It's a bit shy. But okay,
Even that though, like, that's cheap, right? $250, dollars compared to $6,000. You're gonna get hammered on the.
data's not.
Yeah, like how much is it for 1 gigabyte?
1 gigabyte? if you're dealing with 1 gigabyte,
You're wrong.
Yeah. No, I'm just
send like a carrier pigeon or something.
I don't. You can't even get down.
2 gigabytes is free. So 21 gigs is about $2. So yeah, let's crank it. Say that's 250. Support is a big deal, and this is, I think, where something like Azure really shines, because you've got a company like Microsoft standing behind it. So if I need to get a hold of a guy and say, because like a minute, if something's down for an hour, that could potentially cost an organization billions of dollars, right? Think about if Amazon went down for an hour. Just the loss in revenue alone from like their shop would be enormous. And there's certainly a loss of credibility too. You need to be up. So, but anyways, back to the one throat to choke. Say I don't want standard. I want professional direct. So I don't know. Maybe this guy manages half a dozen actual instances. I've got one guy to call for $1,000 a month. So for that app service, we're looking at about $7,500 a month.
Which, when you consider it, it's actually not that much.
Now, if you really need some sort of crazy solution, Microsoft will work with you there too. Like, you know what I mean? If we're getting into this range, we're spending, multiple, thousands of dollars a month on stuff like that. Maybe you need to have, obviously, you're going to need to have sort of a business relationship with the guy at the other end, but they will sort of tailor a solution towards you too.
This is crazy going well.
Yes. What else can we do? Enterprise agreements. Always up. So these guys offer a 99.95 uptime. Unlimited servers and storage. It's they'll keep charging you. You can use as much as you want, and they'll just keep charging you. You know what I mean? Obviously, somebody like Facebook, well, they built their own solutions because they're gazillion-dollar company. Go.
Yeah, I know. It was funny though. One of my co-ops, they used Office 365 for their emails because it was free with a nonprofit, and they said 99.95 or whatever it is uptime, but that was down for 3 days when I was there.
So they fell way short on that, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where was this co-op?
Huh?
Where was your co-op?
Oh, it's at a college down at the.
Sometimes you get what you pay for too, right? When we're talking about free services, their guarantees don't mean much when you're not paying them, right? Anyway, so that would be a quick way to calculate. We don't need to worry about this stuff. Just what you really need to know, and we need to reiterate: turn your VMs off. Nick, turn your VM off. Okay, back to the presentation. I think the rest of this is just sort of trying to sell you a bunch of stuff. Dream it, build it, live it. Join the Microsoft cult. That's good. All right, so let's move into sort of the interactive bit here. I assumed everybody's got their VM spun up. I need to open up Visual Studio. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a web application. We'll just do a MVC.NET application. We're going to deploy it. Yeah, I went low bare bones, I know. I'm trying to be economical with you.
$30 a month, mate. Better turn that off.
I got lots. I think I spent $1. If we go back to my my management, I've spent $1 with it so far. You know what I mean? I got to save my money for that Bitcoin mining operation. You know what I mean?
I did.
Okay, so everybody got Visual Studio open up. We're going to start a new project.
I think I have the dark one.
See, now the 3 gigs of RAM is really dragging me down here.
That's why I recommend 7.
I got 14.
There you go.
You would, Steven. How much, with 14 gigs, how much has it drained your credits? $1, yeah.
I only use it for 3 hours a week.
This is mainly me being lazy and not wanting to re-image what I had. Natasha, don't shake your head at me.
You shouldn't have to re-image. You should actually
Just
scale.
wrap up. You can wrap
You
up.
should be able to scale. Just I want more.
Yeah,
If you want your dashboard, you can wrap up. But it takes time.
it does take time.
You have to drop your VM and come back up again.
It might as well be a re-image, right? Because that's essentially what's happening. You touched on that last week.
Or it stays all in the VM.
Data from the bandwidth perspective, I don't think it charges for that. I only think it charges for services. If you're putting it down and putting it up, I don't think it charges.
But like, if you said I want more, and you already started building something, when you have that new and improved VM, will that still have all your files from your original? What you?
Yeah, it should.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it wouldn't.
Everything is, you're not actually making a VM, you're just upgrading it. Okay.
So there's no migration.
And I think there's also sort of cloning operations you can do to clone an instance, keep this one tucked away and shut down, but you know it's going to have the same things in both of them, and then you can ramp it up if you need to. Anyways, let's get into this. New project.
Are you planning on doing MVC?
Pump the brakes, Jean-Luc. Pump the brakes.
It's hard to read.
Wait for me. I'm gonna. Oh, how about I switch the color scheme?
I don't know if it'll make a difference.
Oh.
I think it'll help. It's not that much easier to.
Where am I going, guys? Preferences? Anybody know?
Tools,
Tools.
preferences, options,
Up, down.
all the way down.
Options. Okay. And then general.
And then you're gonna go into, see the theme up there where it says dark? We're in the
Dark. There we go.
Change to light.
I gotta be honest with you. I don't like the light themes. I feel like a hacker with the dark themes. You know what I mean? Better? What's that?
That's why I use a command prompt.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, but Steven, if you had a nice Retina MacBook, your command prompt looks beautiful. With my nice Monokai color theme, you know what I mean? You guys don't even know what you're missing. Okay. So, better. Although I feel less cool as a result of this. All right, so we're going to go new project. What we need to make sure, though, so we're in Visual C#. We're going to go to cloud. That's important. That's going to let us deploy to the cloud. We want to use a .NET web application. And I'm going to name this deployment example. If you add this sort of stuff in, I think you can, it's important, you know, to optimize your application down the road. They recommend you do it. I don't know, the insights bit, I don't know if it's really necessary. When I tried it earlier today, it threw an error on me. We're gonna roll with it. Okay, deployment example, .NET web application. I'm not gonna worry about source control, create a directory, fire in the hole. When we get this prompt, we're going to choose MVC. I don't want a unit test. We'll do it live. Make sure this is checked, host in the cloud. And I think that's good. I don't think we need to manage the authentication. You can do a virtual machine, like we can spin up a virtual machine from here like we did earlier.
Are you doing it in your VM?
Yeah, I am. It says website instead of web app. I don't know if that's different.
Might be your version of Visual Studio. Usually, if you don't have the Azure SDK loaded into your...
You would have to get that cloud bit, though. You're using the same VM as we're using?
Can't be, because otherwise you'd have the same thing.
We're using the D instead of the A.
That will make a difference because it's just a number.
It could be a different image.
Mine shows about website too.
Whatever. Try websites. I'm sure it's going to be the same thing. But it still has MVC and all that stuff, right? Okay, yeah. As long as you got MVC, you're not just building a website. You're building a web application. Okay, we're going to go OK. There might be a prompt somewhere along the lines to actually sign into or like link the actual Azure account you've set up.
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting right now? Sign, yes. So everybody take the opportunity to input the credentials you used to sign up to your Azure account. And this is going to link it.
Do I want to be kept signed in?
That's up to you, Neil. How secure do you feel?
I don't trust anything.
No, you don't. So don't stay signed in then. You guys can laugh, but that's the kind of guy you want managing your security. I'm pumping Neil's tires a little bit.
That's okay. That's okay.
Okay, so do not everybody name this deployment example. This is going to be the final URL. Name it something else. I'm going to do deployment example. Don't ruin this for me, guys.
I've already done it.
Did you? It's a deployment example? Oh, jeez. Okay.
So why? So curious, Aaron. Just to add to that, why can't they name it the deployment example as well? Why?
Because this is the actual URL endpoint that we're going to go to. So at the end of the day, I'm going to type in deploymentexample.azurewebsites.net. That's where our application is going to be hosted.
So it's a global name. It's something that's hosted across Azure.
It's a
sites.
web URL.
Yeah, that's it. So you can't have the same one.
I'm really surprised that deployment example is not taken, to be honest with you.
I think you should keep it. Go on.
Okay, so what we need to do is we need to create a new service plan. I set one up earlier today, but we're going to create a new one. And I'm going to say deployment. Oh, let's do some camel case again.
It's because of your version of Azure SDK. That's it.
What do you have?
Mine looks like that, but like
Just the region and database.
So it's your VM. Your VM's slightly different than yours.
Don't worry. I'm sure it's going to spin up a new instance for you. It might just not be uniquely named like mine is. So I'm going to say deployment example service. And then for the resource group, we could share resources with other things. I don't want to do that. I'm going to say deployment example group. I want it to be in East US, and we don't need a database.
what version of Visual Studio are you running?
2013 community. The one that comes packaged with, there was one of the images was Windows Server 2012 with 2013 Community Edition.
Yeah, that's what I'm
It might have to do with me installing the Azure SDK, or I have a new version of the Azure SDK.
And that's what you should do. If you actually go into your tools and extensions in
Into the
Visual
same
Studio, if you do
But it said
updates,
they were already installed.
well, no, they are. It's just that
It might be an outdated version. I don't know. Natasha says that hers is the same as mine, and she didn't install that. So
it must be her VM the way she
there's some sort of VM setting that there's a discrepancy there, but let's not worry about that. It's all going to be sort of the same in the end. We'll figure it out. Okay, so we've got our URL set up, we've got our service set up, our group set up, and we're going to host it in the East US. We don't need a database. Fire in the hole. There's no explosions? Well. Doc marks.
Using that term for everything when we get another grenade.
Like, you guys don't like fire in the hole? We gotta have fun here, guys. Not.
It's like yelling fire, man. Oh, I see.
Do you have like do you have PTSD and like I'm triggering you or something?
Oh, that's right. There's an update inside our update.
Updateception.
If you go to tools and extensions, there's an update.
Yeah.
Press the SDK for Azure.
All is well.
Figure it out.
Is it good?
Are we all sort of on this screen? We all got the green bar going here.
Yeah.
Well, other than Natasha, but
Green bar right.
this is my my 3 gigabytes of RAM here.
There you go.
Okay. Congratulations, you've created a project. Awesome. So
You're almost done.
almost there. It's dealing with that insights check thing I clicked earlier. Probably didn't need it. Let's install a package. Why not?
It does telemetry. It does basically trying to figure out if your application is efficient.
Okay.
Right. That's what insights is. I don't think we need it at this stage, especially for web apps. Don't need it unless it's a big one. If you're being an enterprise level app, then it makes sense. But sometimes it'll see that red.
I think it's going to throw the same error that it threw on me earlier.
It's fine. You can ignore it, and then what you do is just publish at the bottom there.
It's doing its thing.
Yeah, let's finish this thing. It's going to add in additional references.
So you can see the references filling out there.
Yeah,
Right?
and then once the references are done, then it's going to be done its deployment locally, and then you have to publish afterwards.
All right, we're just going to ignore this big red bar here, like I do with every other warning.
So if you scroll down, Aaron, in that red section there, right?
We're down to the bottom.
Okay, good.
Okay, so what I'm going to do right off the hop, let's test it locally, see if our application works. We're going to hold our nose and use Internet Explorer. I do. I don't like it one bit. You would, Neil.
I also have Firefox.
You're supposed to be like.
What he's doing right now is just he clicks the Internet Explorer. It's already built something.
0.
I should have bumped it up, yeah. I'm a failure as a presenter with my 3 gigabytes of RAM. Anyways, bam! We've got an application. Look at that sexy bootstrap. We got a nice jumbotron going up here. It's like I said, it's got bootstrap pre-installed. It's responsive. It's beautiful. We got the hamburger popping. We're gold. So we know that this application works. Next thing we want to do is deploy the sucker. So I'm going to shut this guy down. It won't even know what hit it. All right, where am I going with deploy here? I can't remember. We'll figure it out. If somebody finds it, shout it out. Throw me a bone here.
Azure App Security or Service Activity.
Oh, right here. There we go. So we click this little tab, see the bottom left corner. You got your output console, then you got your Azure App Security. Then, didn't like this.
I don't have that.
You have to deploy again. You have to go right-click on your app and deploy. Did it run locally, Aaron?
It ran locally, yes.
Okay, so you go to your right-click on your project.
This guy?
Right-click.
It's logged down here. Here we go.
Publish.
Okay, so yeah, okay, we're gonna go to publish.
Nothing there.
We're gonna go to, I guess this is what I did earlier. Select a publish target, Microsoft Azure Web Apps. And we're going to choose what we created earlier. We're gonna go okay. We go next. Oh, previous. This is the release publish or release config. You can set different configurations. Say if you're doing sort of a staging thing, you need to keep some sort of development dependencies sort of along for the ride. You could do that, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go right to release. Settings are all good. Let's publish this sucker.
Did it work for you?
We're getting there. It's publishing as we speak. It's in the tubes. And I think when it publishes, it automatically pops a browser window open. Awesome. And just so we know, that this isn't just sort of inside the VM. Let's go over to OSX here. And let's go to the actual deployment example. Azure websites. I don't like that they call them websites. They're not websites. .net, not new. Bam. And we're live. We're up. We've deployed right from Visual Studio. Now, that is one way to do it. Keep in mind, we can do it a few different ways. GitHub, Dropbox, whatever you name it, whatever you're comfortable with. I really like this sort of workflow. I think Visual Studio is Microsoft's best product by far. I could take or leave Windows, but Visual Studio as a developer, I think it blows Xcode out of the water as far as I'm concerned. And there's a lot of other things that it's just a really rich ecosystem of tools that we can use to build almost anything we need to. Any other questions? That pretty much wraps up my presentation. Did everybody get published?
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Who didn't get published? What's going on, Mark?
The window didn't pop up.
Is it still building?
I did not. Like, where you enter your authentication.
Oh, to link it to the account? I have been recording this, so if you guys want to go back, if you really want to listen to me talk for another hour and a half, be my guest. We'll throw it up on, I think we'll just throw it up on your, we'll throw it up on Tom's YouTube account with his other recordings, and we'll be good to go.
Oh, you click the circle in the taskbar by your Adobe A
To do what?
to stop the recording.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for teaching me how to stop a video. All right, thank you very much, guys.